Welcome to Quick Take. I'm your host, Susie, along with my amazing co host, James. How are you, James?
I'm fantastic. How are you today, Susie?
I am awesome. So, you often, as you know, many people don't know this. You are my tech guru. Whenever I have a technology question or I don't know something, you're a safe space for me. So, I'm going to
Yep.
use this platform to ask kind of a question. I'm starting
Sure.
to hear a lot about the metaverse. Am I even
Right.
saying that right? The
You are.
metaverse and I immediately think, oh, when I hear about it, it sounds confusing. I don't really understand it. And the thing I think about is that's not going to affect me in the
Right.
role that I play. And so I just wanted to bring that to you because I don't really understand it and I don't
Right.
have a vision for what it means. And maybe you do.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And before our listeners turn this off because they're in the same boat you are, which is this is not real. I don't need to worry about that. This is right up there with keeping track of what version of iPhone you have because who
Right.
can do that anymore? I mean, it's all the same thing.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
but the reality is the metaverse, which is both a generic term, and then there's the Meta Facebook company who has invested millions of dollars, billions of dollars to promote that technology concept. It is real, and I think while we are in a space where it's a very niche situation, I think as leaders and executives we have to think about this like many things that impact our employees and our customers, that there are risks associated with it.
Hmm.
And like anything else, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of something. I don't know what that pound of butter.
Don't ask me to finish that statement. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, this is an area that I guarantee you there are some of your employees that have seen this, used it, and I suspect that the potential for risk for you and your team and your company is probably underestimated.
Well, how are people using it now?
That's a great question. I think obviously you can pick up any technology magazine and there's all sorts of really quirky, nuanced things and maybe some edge cases. But I think some of the most applicable ideas are training. How do we get
Huh.
people in a space and show them the products that they would be seeing? Give them a virtual experience of, hey, this is what it looks like to be using this product. Hey, this is how this product looks in the field. And then collaboration. Obviously, when we've kind of gone really far on the Zoom collaboration, and we've seen the limitations of that. But when there's a virtual element to it, and you are immersed in that experience with somebody else, your collaboration can be a lot different.
All right, great.
And
Let's
so
let's
those things are
talk.
happening now.
All right, let's talk about what that looks like. That means what you're saying is that you and I, instead of looking at each other through our cameras
Right.
on Zoom, we would literally be looking, it would appear like we were right next to each other.
Could be right. So in my, I might
Okay.
put on my Google goggles or my Meta goggles or whatever the names
Okay.
are these days, and there's a number of VR products out there. Some are from those big names, some are just high end technology products. And you would wear those, but I would, for this use case, I would look to my right and you would appear to be sitting next to me, and so I could just lean over and say, "Hey, where is that file?" Or "Did you mail me that thing?" Versus setting up a Zoom and making the phone call. So it really creates an environment that's just more collaborative and more casual. That I've seen and worked with companies where we had a Zoom, if you will, a video screen up all the time to another office. So you could
Yeah.
see people walk by, and it's very similar experience to create that connection. So
Okay.
this is happening, and it's real. But I also think that it's worth discussing because I think leadership should be aware of the potential issues.
And so are we in my house or like do you decide where to go?
Could be
Like give me
anywhere.
one
We
more
could
dimension.
be in a virtual office that looks like the New York headquarters, or could we
Okay.
be in a grass hut at on the
Gosh.
Tahiti headquarters? And it really wouldn't make any difference. So the experience would be whatever the company decides. But I think that's a great segue into the first thing I recommend people think about is you've got to set down the rules. You've got to
Yeah.
state what is right, and no different than having a set of guidelines for the use of Twitter or any sort of online communication, I think it's important that companies consider the metaverse experience and establishing what is appropriate and what it's not. Right now, there's nothing that keeps me from having my avatar look like the president of any company in America and wearing
Wow.
the logo of that company and walking around pretending I'm that guy.
Wow.
You've got to tell your employees, look, the certain behaviors are not appropriate. And so
How do you
documenting
know?
that, setting it up in advance is huge.
Well, then, if you don't know that much about it, how do you know what boundaries to put on it to say, you okay, your avatar can only look like you can only say your name is James, you can only
I
how do
think
you
it's
know?
important that you reach out to people who are involved in this and
Okay,
understand it and establish it.
okay.
Like this is kind of a situation where you've got to have the guardrails, but you also I appreciate that not every person is involved in this. I don't use TikTok, but I certainly need to be aware of its capabilities and have people around me that do, so I can set the rules and
Yeah,
the guidelines for my employees. Despite the fact that I don't see, I'm not on TikTok as much as other people.
okay.
So it's kind of a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
You need to, if you're going to set down the law, you need to really start to understand it.
Well, I guess from an executive coach perspective, I would say you can also say like we haven't quite figured out exactly how we're going to use this, but for now, these are some of the things that are our expectations. You can frame it
Yep. Yep. You can
that
frame
way.
it. And then I think it is that second step, which is like, let's set the rules. And
Yeah.
then, my second piece of advice is set the guardrails. Look, we will only use it as a firm for training. We will only use it as a
Yeah.
firm for collaboration. You know, Setting that boundary helps people frame for what is possible, and it ensures that you don't have people that are doing interesting things. I think Microsoft. I know they reached out to a company called Tailspin to help them build their training work,
Wow.
and Accenture did the same thing.
Wow.
And they helped that. Not only did they create the training, but they also created a series of metaverse etiquette and communication styles so their employees would know how to behave in those training programs. So,
Wow.
you've got to, I like to say you've got to build bridges, not walls, as you reach into that digital divide.
Wow. That's so interesting to think about. And do you have another tip?
Well, I think the most important one is you really have to understand that you have to enforce this code, right? It's
Yeah.
silly to say, you can't do this and then really have no way of monitoring it. Now that's challenging, right? That doesn't your compliance team isn't going to go run out and get the new meta goggles and start wandering around and seeing what's going on. But you do have to assume that it's happening. And if you do get wind of it through the press or through other people you're doing, you've got to know that you've got to have rules around that, and there are ramifications. That whether it's moderation tools to keep that happening, or there's some sort of rules and ramifications of not meeting that. The company really needs to be prepared for the worst.
Wow, this is really incredible. Are there any resources that you would suggest for people to kind of get their toes
Yeah,
wet?
actually, that's a great question. There's a handful of companies, and I think Meta is doing a decent job. And I know that there's a couple independent companies like that are putting together some of those frameworks for the guardrails. We'll put some of those links to that in our
Okay.
show notes. But I think like many things, it's horrible to start with a blinking cursor where you're like, metaverse and us, that's really challenging as a company to figure that out. But to take something and maybe build on it and say, hey, this applies to our team, applies to our people, applies to this office and not that office. These links will give you some insights as to where to start.
Oh, it'll be so interesting to listen back on this episode when we
Oh yeah.
better understand it. We're gonna sound like this is so basic.
Well, it's that Katie Couric video where
Yeah.
she, what was that, in the late 90s, where she was like, what is the internet? Um,
You
and
have an address. It's a world wide web. It starts
That's
with
right.
World Wide Web.
Where is that?
That's exactly what we're talking about here.
That's
So
exactly
don't
what we're talking
feel
about.
Like, people shouldn't feel in inhibited or intimidated by
Right.
it. Go in it with curiosity. Now's the time,
Yep.
and these are great things to keep in mind.
Sure.
So, bring it back around for us. Give us the 3
And
tips again.
yeah, I think the first thing that we need to remember is, that a company needs to set the rules and set the boundaries for what is is acceptable. And then you've got to reach out it. And I love the way you put that. Go into it with a level of curiosity. Bring an expert in. Bring in a consultant that could just give your board or give your leadership team just a primer on what this really is and what it looks like. Get an example. Get a demo. The opportunity here is huge, but you've got to go out and kind of understand it. And then third, if you're going to set the boundaries, you've got to set the consequences. And I think you really need to give that some thought, apply it similarly to the work you do, or maybe about the people's social media rules. But I think indicating that it's important and indicating that there's consequences, I think is critical.
Wow, I love that we're on the cutting edge, at least for
Yay!
me.
So,
Like, I wouldn't have even known to ask until I started hearing about it. So,
yeah, it's
great
a tough
advice.
one.
Yeah. Thanks so much, James.
You bet.